Really excited to have John Condit join us here in studio. Of course, Ohio sports reporter joins us here in Las Vegas. John, great to have you in town. And we, Jensen and I, were talking, whenever you talk about Pete Rose and the all-time hits leader in Major League Baseball, and certainly with his passing, and you were one of the last guys to talk to Pete before his passing last year. It is fascinating on many different levels. Can you tell the people what you're working on? And I know it's a documentary, and it also goes to Eric Schau, who gave up that historic hit to Pete Rose back in the 80s.
Yes, and this is really the first time I'm talking publicly about the film we're working on. So Eric Schau, God rest his soul, passed back in 1994, asked me as a friend to sneak him out of Riverfront Stadium the night before he gave up the hit to Pete Rose. And I'm working on a film about his life, with a lot of the film in the middle about 4192, that exciting night, September 11th, 1985. And of course, the 40th anniversary is coming up this September.
John, it's remarkable, too, as, again, someone who was born and raised in Cleveland, but also I did my middle school and high school down at Cincinnati Anderson. And so, you grow up with it. I was born in 84. So obviously seeing, all of that and growing up in the Big Red Machine and obviously the World Series there in the 90s. What stands out to you the most as you were gathering kind of the details and being around it firsthand and really concocting the idea for this documentary?
Yeah, there was a great article written by Tom Friend in 2010 called The Tragic Life of Eric Schau. And I remember reading that. And I thought, you know what? This story needs to be told someday. And that's where it was born. It's an incredible article. You can find it online by Tom Friend, who at the time was at ESPN.com. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I grew up right down the road in Madisonville by Fairfax in Cincinnati. So we grew up close together down there. But I wanted to tell this story because Eric Schau is still the winningest pitcher in Padre history. And we went on, did a man on the street out at spring training and offered a $25 gift card to fans. Who is the winningest pitcher in Padre history? They guessed Randy Jones. They guessed Peavy. They guessed Hoffman. Finally, I got to give one away.
Somebody finally got Eric Schau.
Yeah. Remember, Berman used to call him Eric Win, Place, and Schau on ESPN.
Yes, that's right.
And, we're talking with the Padres organization because the family, Eric's widow, his sisters, they'd like Eric to be in the Hall of Fame for the Padres. He's the winningest pitcher, but he's not in the Hall of Fame for the Pods. Fascinating.
We're going to get to all those tentacles. And, of course, we've been talking about it leading up to your appearance here, John, that we've got some sound that nobody's heard before, and you're going to debut it for us here, right here on VSiN by the Books. And obviously when people think of Pete Rose, they're going to think of why is he in the Hall of Fame. We know about Bart Giamatti and the history of that in the 80s. But we do want to take a listen to Pete talking to you about sports betting in modern baseball, in modern sports. So we could, for the first time, you're going to hear it from Pete before his passing on his thoughts on modern-day baseball and gambling.
You understand. You watch ESPN. Everything is about gambling. Picking the games after the fifth inning if you want to rebet. Stuff like that. But it was a no-no when I did it. And it was. We live in a gambling society today. I think you'll agree with that. And it's not going to change. It's going to get bigger and bigger. It's not going to get less. And I'm not advocating players that bet on baseball. I know some guys will bet you to Mars, not Saturday, if you give them 2-1. I bet on a duck one time and the son of a drowned. Think about that. That's some bad luck, man.
Only the way Pete can say it, right, John?
He's incredible. And, I needed to get that interview. Otherwise, I don't think we would have had the legs or the sizzle to tell the Eric Schau story. So I get this, and he was fantastic. He wasn't feeling well that day. When we were done with the interview, I said, Pete, if you want to go up to your room, we're in a hotel. I said, feel free. He goes, no, I'd just like to just sit here and relax. His back was bothering him. And we were interviewing Tony Perez down in Miami recently, And he said, boy, Pete went down to Nashville to sign some balls with some of the Big Red Machine at one of those shows. And Tony said, I knew something wasn't right. So he really declined quickly after that interview.
John, when you think about now all the time that's passed and the day and age that we live in, having kind of firsthand knowledge of not only what Eric went through, and the story in of itself for him is just unbelievable. I know that's one that you will tell. But everything that Pete had to deal with, and I remember as a youngster growing up in Cincinnati, and that's what you'd hear about, but also just the human aspect of this, having to deal with it day in and day out. What do you take away most from how both those paths eventually collided for what will be one of the most historic moments in our sports history?
Yeah, that's a deep question. It's interesting. It's two people that Pete's not in the Hall of Fame at Cooperstown. Eric's not in the Hall of Fame in San Diego yet. Hopefully he will be at some point. But Pete did a lot of wrong things.
Yes.
Did a lot of things off the field. Lied a long time. I'll never forget it. Before he was banned, I gave him a letter, and I said, Pete, when you get in the car or on the airplane, read this. And it said, if you did it, admit it. It's a very forgiving society. You'll be okay. And he took the letter. Whether he read it back then, I don't know. But 2 months later, he was banned, and then he lied all the way through. He lied to Jim Gray on TV, and then he writes a book, and it's like, I did do it. So he made a lot of mistakes, but when President Trump said he was thinking about he was going to pardon Pete, I liked that. I liked that act of mercy. I liked that act of compassion, because statistically, more hits, more winning games, more runs scored. He belongs in the Hall of Fame, and it's going to be a shame that if it happens, it'll be great if it happens. Finally, it's a shame it didn't happen while he was alive.
And that's other parts of this piece that I did want to get to if we could. And this is Pete talking to you about that exact thing, about being put in posthumously. This is from Pete talking to you, John, about that very issue.
I've come to the conclusion, and I hope I'm wrong, that I'll make the Hall of Fame after I die, which I totally disagree with, because the Hall of Fame is for two reasons: your fans and your family. That's what the Hall of Fame is for. Your fans and your family. And it's for your family if you're here. It's for your fans if you're here, not if you're 10 feet under. You understand what I'm saying? What good's it going to do me or my fans if they put me in the Hall of Fame a couple years after I pass away? What's the point? What's the point? Because they'll make money over it? The Hall of Fame is for what you did on the field, not what you did off the field.
Okay, so John, how do we juxtapose that? Because you have Pete in his own words telling you, I don't want to get in after I pass. And now that he has sadly passed, and there is a movement to get Pete in, what do you think the family wants? Because he says it's for the family, it's for him, it's for the family, it's for the fans. Is it still a healing thing if he's put in, even though that would be against Pete's own wishes?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, he should go in. I think his family would love that. I really do. His children, the fans would go crazy. Really, if Pete doesn't go into the Hall of Fame, his biggest night to be remembered is May 14th in Cincinnati, when MLB and the Reds are going to have Pete Rose night. My family's got 50 tickets to go to that game. Everybody's going to get a jersey. But, from up above, wherever, Pete would want to see this happen, and it's going to be the biggest day in Hall of Fame history if he goes in. I mean, Cooperstown will be packed, crazy packed. And, we're giving a baseball away at pardonpete.com. Pardonpete.com. All you're doing is signing a petition asking President Trump to pardon Pete before May 14th. Don't wait any longer. Do it before that big night. So hopefully some folks will go there and sign that petition and get the president to do that.
John, very quickly from me, again, we remember when live news would break in for the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run chase, and we were all there watching it. If Pete were here today, do you feel that he'd still have a change of heart perhaps and be like, you know what, our society is the way it is now, but I'm actually happy for what will eventually transpire, and to not forget that Eric Shao on the other side, pitcher hitter dynamics, the beauty of our game.
Yeah, you know, I asked Pete if he could do it differently. If would he do it over again? And I was surprised that his answer in the interview was probably not. Probably not, because I thought I could get away with it.
Do you mind sticking around, John?
Sure.
If you can, Jensen, let's carry this over. Let's come on back, take a quick break, because there's more meat on this bone. Certainly, when we get the man that spoke to Pete Rose before his passing, we got to continue this conversation. So we'll have much more when you come back with us here with John Condit, talking about Pete Rose, Hall of Fame, Eric Schau, a documentary to be released. Come on back. It's VSiN, by the way. John Condit, kind enough to join us here in studio as we're talking about a new documentary that you have on, which really does focus on Eric Schau, of course, who was a legendary pitcher for the San Diego Padres, but he's not in the Padres Hall of Fame, most notably known for giving up the historic hit to Pete Rose. And then you got to have this great conversation with Pete before his passing last year. It kind of, I guess, looking back on it already, I mean, you knew he was in poor health, but getting one of those final interviews with Pete, John, I mean, that in and of itself, you were one of the final people to talk to him about these subjects that people want to know dearly about.
Yeah, definitely the last full-blown sit-down studio interview, which still blows me away that it happened that way. And remember, Eric really didn't want to give up that hit, and he sat down on the mound. Do you remember him sitting down on the mound?
Yes.
That's part of the story. How was that perceived? Why did he sit down on the mound? But the other thing that Eric did before we get back to Pete is, in '87, he ran a fastball up on the Hawk, Andre Dawson, and hit him in the face, which led to a huge brawl at Wrigley Field. Mm-hmm. And Eric wrote a handwritten apology note to Andre Dawson in the clubhouse before he left the stadium.
Wow.
But there's a lot of history around that drama. It ended up being on the front cover of Sports Illustrated. So you really needed Pete's perspective to tell the full Eric story.
So very quickly, he did not. Some guys are like, you go to Traxel's home run against Mark McGwire. Sometimes those moments in history, you almost want to be a part of them, even though you're the foil. Eric did not want that with Pete.
He didn't. That's why he wanted me to sneak him out of the stadium. He didn't want to face the press. I had the only audio interview the night before the hit. Eric was a physics major. He was brilliant. He was a little prideful. And he just didn't want to go down in the history books like Al Downing did, giving up the big hit to home run to Hank Aaron. And I said, Eric, if it happens, be the first one over there to shake Pete's hand. And he did that. But then the celebration went on for 9 minutes. Pete gave me some great sound. He cries on the field. He talks about that. But Eric finally just took a seat. And so in the documentary, we're talking to Gary Templeton, Bruce Bochy, Chris Welsh, Terry Kennedy. Bochy was behind the dish that night. It's really going to be a great film, hopefully released in September, right at the 40th anniversary. We've not necessarily named it yet, but we're looking for the right partner at some point. Streaming's everywhere.
Sure.
I hope somebody wants to pick this sucker up.
John, and one quick follow-up on, and again, this hits home as a former pitcher. I played right at the end of the steroid era. And also, was in the media when the Astros sign stealing scandal happened. I've been on record. I've told Dave this. I've told our audience. I would much rather pitch in the steroid era because you still got to hit the ball. Knowing what's coming is a completely different competitive advantage. And I've tried to relate it back to the betting side of this, and also, from the human side, like the amount of pressure on those pitchers, knowing that you were just hits away from Pete Rose ascending to the top as the hit king. Can only imagine the mental things on top of what Eric was going through. How deep were you able to get in on where Eric's story was leading up to that, and what he physically and mentally was going through leading up to that moment?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We have his lovely widow, Karamia, on camera for the first time since his death 31 years ago. Two of his sisters, childhood friends, talking about his life. Eric talked about the fact that around 87, 88, the greenies were starting to happen.
Yeah.
People were taking the amphetamines and whatnot. His drug issue started around 89, 90 when he had a back issue and had some back surgery. But it's really interesting because Rose breaks the record in Chicago on September 8th, goes back to the plate. Marge Schott, the owner's pulling her hair out at the Bengals game watching this, saying, I'm going to kill him if he breaks it there. And if it wasn't for Sean Dunster making a diving stab, Pete breaks the record in Chicago.
Wow.
He sits out Monday, plays Perez because Dravecki's a left-hander. Lamar Hoyt shuts him down on Tuesday. And do you know that Dave Campbell, the color play-by-play for the Padres, predicted in June of '85 that it would be Eric Schau? Because Eric he did. It's going to be in the film. He literally says the night of the hit, I predicted it was going to be Eric Schau back in June. I'm not wishing it. And it's Eric just found his way around some controversy and a lot of big moments in his career.
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Certainly, as you mentioned, John, Pete made his share of mistakes. Let's hear from Pete in his own words again in the conversation he had with you about those mistakes that he made.
When you make a mistake, don't be bitter at other people. I wish I hadn't made the mistake, but I did. It's history. Get over it. I didn't hurt you as a fan. I didn't hurt that gentleman as a fan. I didn't hurt Arnie as a fan. I didn't hurt any of my fans by betting on the game of baseball. And by the way, betting on the game of baseball to win. To win. Okay? I win to win every game. Every game I played in, I win to win. I happen to win more than anybody else, but that's okay. Not bad.
Okay, therein lies the rub. That I think I don't want to say Pete apologists, for people that are adamant that he should be in the Hall of Fame, it's what Pete said there. That I bet, yes, I shouldn't have bet, but I bet on my team to win. I don't think Bart Giamatti back in the day thought there was any difference, right? Betting was betting. It was the rule. You broke the rule. We don't have, there's no gray area. Is there a gray area? Because it seemed like in Pete's mind, at least, that was the differentiating point of it, that because I bet on my team, it should not be as punitive as just betting in general.
I don't think so. I went into that clubhouse many times, and there was a sign right there as you walked in. You've seen it too.
Yep.
You don't do it. He did wrong. I don't think it matters whether you bet, but I think at the end of the day, I just err on the side of compassion. I think President Trump's talking about that as well. I think most baseball, I think both arguments are defendable. So if someone says Pete should not be in the Hall of Fame, I respect that position. I really do. I tend to be a gray guy, not a black and white guy. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, I'd love to see him get in there because of his statistics. But if someone, anyway, I'll leave it at that. I just think he deserves to be in there because of his statistics. I hope President Trump pardons him very soon. And I think May 14th in Cincinnati is going to be an incredible night. But only time will tell. And we know the reinstatement, yes or no question is coming from the commissioner soon.
Yeah, and again, Rob Manfred will be stepping down in 2029, John. So that will be one of those demarcation points of that. Very quickly, my last one for you. It's still wild, and us being in the media, me being on the playing side, and knowing how both sides work. I'm still just mind blown that in '89 there you're standing, with a photog, taping an interview, and then you get interrupted because the phrase is uttered. Hey, you're being investigated by MLB for allegedly betting on baseball. It's still one of the things you cannot wrap your head around how that juxtaposition of emotion is in that moment.
Yeah, that was incredible. I'm 23 years old, and John Browdy, the PR guy for the Reds, interrupts the interview, which never happens. It wasn't live, and just says, "I'm sorry to do this, John. I just got to talk to Pete." And Jim Booker and myself can hear him say, "You're being investigated by MLB for betting on baseball. I need to tell you that right now."
That is just wild.
It's wild.
And then the other thing, as a young kid, I'm down there, and the next day he's in the dugout, and he's sitting up on the dugout like above, and the entire national press is there, and Pete's kind of like not saying anything. So finally I say, "Pete, you don't seem to be taking this very seriously." And as a young sportscaster, that soundbite was used all over the networks that night. That question, "Pete, you don't seem to be taking this very seriously." His answer was what was played everywhere in the world that night.
We got to wrap it up here. We got about a minute to go, John. But if you did have what is your lasting message for people when they watch this documentary? What do you want them to take away from it?
So when I talked to his family, I said, "Look, I want to do a documentary that people watch and say, you know what? Eric Schau was a pretty good guy and a pretty damn good pitcher, and ultimately, I want San Diego Padres to put him in their Hall of Fame. But the story is about baseball, competitiveness, ups and downs, addiction, early death. There's a lot of messages in the story of Eric Schau that is in this, but it's a great baseball story, but it's a great life story."
Fascinating. PardonPete.com?
PardonPete.com. Register to win a baseball. Pete signed for me on September 20th just by going and asking the president to pardon them before May 14th.
We'll be watching May 14th. When you get this movie coming, come on back out and see us, and we'll gladly talk about it again.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Great
John.
to be here. Love you guys. Thank you.
John Condit, fascinating work right there. Cannot wait to see the finished product. It's going to be fantastic.